This is the best Korean movie of this year. It has a strong lingering impact and is extremely realistic. The movie has a very low budget, yet it penetrates the complexity of human nature and the indifference of society. A female skeleton of someone murdered 40 years ago appears at the very beginning, and as the truth is uncovered, all the audience fall into silence and reflection. What on earth is going on here? Although the man Kam was born blind, he became a national treasure level seal carver in South Korea with just his hands. This kind of spirit is touching. A TV station director came specially because of his reputation. He wanted to shoot a documentary about Kam. Facing the camera, Kam tried to say as many polite and formal remarks as possible. His son Dongwon also cooperated actively, but after the director left, Kam complained that the reporter was too gossipy. Dongwon said that for the sake of ratings, directors just like to talk about attractive topics. This is very normal, and thanks to her, other people can get to know the national treasure level master Kam. As they were talking, Dongwon received a call from the police station, saying that a lady named Young-Hee was looking for him. However, Dongwon didn't know anyone with that name. The policeman asked in shock if he didn't even know his own mother's name. Dongwon was obviously stunned. He then hurried to the police station to check the situation. The policeman took him to see a skeleton. He said there was an ID card in the pocket of the clothes on the skeleton. The ID card belonged to Ms. Young-Hee. The reason why the skeleton was found was that a mountainous area was going to be developed into an apartment complex. The construction team dug up this skeleton while working. The forensic examination concluded that the owner of the body died 40 years ago. Because the time was really too long ago, it is now impossible to determine the cause of death. However, judging from the state in which the body was buried, the police believe that the possibility of Young-Hee falling accidentally is very small. This means she was most likely murdered. It's just that too many years have passed. Even if the murderer is found, the statute of limitations has expired. Dongwon couldn't process this information. He had relied on his father since he was a child. But now, a mother who died from murder has appeared. The most crucial thing is, Kam had told Dongwon since he was little that his mother had abandoned them and run away. It seems there was a misunderstanding here. Kam also felt very regretful. He thought he had wronged his wife, because he had always thought Young-Hee was really gentle and kind. Just then, director Mary came to pay her condolences. Dongwon originally wanted to ask her to pause the filming first, but Mary said it wouldn't cause a delay. Their filming couldn't be postponed any longer. Besides, this way would instead make everything more real and natural. Dongwon still tried to argue for not filming first, but at this moment, two ladies suddenly arrived. Dongwon, looking confused, stepped forward to ask about the situation. The two ladies said they were Young-Hee's sisters, which meant they were Dongwon's aunts. They were accompanied by their children. At the arrival of these unfamiliar relatives, Dongwon appeared very awkward. At this point, one aunt's son spoke up, saying that their grandfather had also left Young-Hee a share of the inheritance. Before he passed away, no one intended to take it for themselves, but Kam had a falling out with them in the past, so they didn't bring up this matter back then. Now that the misunderstanding has been cleared up, they thought the inheritance should rightfully be given to Dongwon. Not Dongwon said talking about money now would hurt their relationship. As soon as they heard he didn't want it, the aunt's son quickly smiled and asked him to record the conversation as evidence. Dongwon said he didn't want to deal with these things right now. He would write a letter of guarantee and have it notarized later. They could rest assured about that. But he had only one request, that if the aunts had any photos of Young-Hee, could they give him one to use as a portrait for the funeral. But the aunts said they didn't have any, because Young-Hee was very ugly, and didn't like taking photos. These words were really absurd. Moreover, the aunts also said that Young-Hee had run away from home when she was very young, and never went back after that, so their sisterly bond wasn't strong. Dongwon wanted to know the reason. The aunt explained that Young-Hee had insisted on telling everyone in the village that she saw her own father having an affair. When their mother found out, she was so angry that she beat Young-Hee. Young-Hee had to rest for several days before she could get up. She took all her mother's old belongings and left without a word. She was simply a thief. Dongwon was greatly shocked. A woman who finds out her husband is having an affair should question her husband and the other woman, not anyone else. Why would she take it out on her own daughter? The aunt retorted, yelling that Young-Hee was an ugly woman and a jinx. Their family was living a good life originally, but Young-Hee had to spout nonsense and try to destroy the family. If they didn't beat her, who else would they beat? Dongwon was so angry at these relatives that he almost laughed. Late at night, Dongwon went outside the morning hall to smoke, but he heard Mary trying to exploit Young-Hee's matter for her own gain. A mix of emotions welled up in Dongwon's heart. He felt that in this world, it seemed like no one was truly sad about his mother's passing. The next day, the family members were supposed to say goodbye to the body. The aunt felt sick from the smell of decay. She shouted at Kam to end the ceremony quickly. After saying that, she turned to leave first, looking disgusted. The forensic doctor, distraught, said he had spent a long time piecing the body together, but the aunt looked indifferent. She thought the body would be burned to ashes anyway in the end, so there was no need to piece it together. After this part of the ceremony ended, everyone left. Dongwon was also ready to leave when he suddenly received a call from Mary. Mary said that after investigation, they found Young-hee had worked at Chongpeng Garment Factory before. The area near the garment factory was exactly where the skeleton was dug up. If Dongwon wanted to investigate anything, maybe he could find a breakthrough there. Dongwon was curious about what kind of person his mother was. His father said she was kind, yet he had resented her for so many years. His aunts were his mother's blood relatives, but all they did was insult her, and someone had even killed her, though no one knew how. Could the garment factory really unlock these secrets? The next day, Dongwon went to meet Mary. He saw Mary secretly tuck a camera into her bag. He didn't say anything about it. The two of them found former employees of the garment factory who knew Young-hee, and chatted with them to ask if they knew anything. The former employees all said Young-hee was an ugly woman. Only Cam, who was blind, was willing to get close to her. Mary wanted to know more details, and the former employees were happy to share everything they knew. They said that 40 years ago, the country's economy was in an upward phase. The garment factory was extremely busy every day, so they recruited workers on a large scale. But even with more people, there was still only that one toilet. If you wanted to use the toilet, you had to line up. One day, Young-hee had a stomachache. She asked her supervisor for permission to go to the toilet. The supervisor, looking annoyed, said, "We're so busy right now. Why do you need to go to the toilet?" Young-hee explained that she really couldn't hold it in, and she would be back in a minute. However, she couldn't finish in the specified time and had to go back. In the end, she soiled her pants. She was ugly and had made a huge fool of herself. She became the laughingstock of the entire garment factory, even after 40 years. When the former employees thought about this incident now, they still laughed at Young-hee without mercy. Mary asked if anyone had a grudge against Young-hee. The former employees said there probably wasn't anyone. Although Young-hee was a silly, ugly woman, she had a kind heart. Later, she married Cam, and they should have lived a happy life. How could she die so suddenly? At this moment, an elderly man thought carefully. He suddenly remembered that Young-hee had some kind of history with the garment factory owner. Mary immediately perked up with interest, but the three former employees refused to talk about it. However, they provided the name of another person. This matter didn't stump Mary. She immediately contacted her team to find this person. After that, she told Dongwon to just wait for good news. Dongwon suggested that he wanted to investigate on his own, but Mary said with her help, things would be twice as effective with half the effort. After saying that, she drove away. The next day, Mary and Dongwon went to the home of another former employee, Jin-suk. When Jin-suk learned they had come for matters related to Young-hee, she told them what had happened back then. She said Young-hee was a very kind person. Back then, Jin-suk was immature and often ordered Young-hee to do things, but Young-hee never complained. Once, Jin-suk saw Young-hee staying at the garment factory crying late at night, and she went over to comfort her. Jin-suk then told Young-hee what had happened to her. In fact, Jin-suk was violated by the garment factory owner. The reason she didn't dare to report it was that the owner always paid salaries and bonuses on time. All the employees were loyal to him. If Jin-suk went against the owner, it would be like going against all the employees in the factory. But Young-hee was the only one who didn't think that way. When she found out that Jin-suk was going to be fired, she rushed into the owner's office to demand an explanation.
사장님이 제 봉사님한테 몹쓸 짓 해서 안 나오는 거잖아요.
When the owner heard this, he flew into a rage. He shouted at Young-hee to stop talking nonsense, and told her to get out of the office immediately. Young-hee still didn't give him a good look. She slammed the door and left, then went home. She took out paper and a pen and wrote frantically. Cam asked his wife why she was doing this. Young-hee didn't give any response. The next day, the owner acted as if nothing had happened, and tried to ask a young girl to take photos with him. Unexpectedly, the girl ran away faster than a rabbit. The owner thought the girl was just too shy, and grinned triumphantly, but as he kept smiling, he noticed something was wrong. He followed an employee's gaze and looked down. He found that the ground was covered with remarks accusing him of being a devil. He knew it was Young-hee who had done this. The owner called his subordinates into the office to reprimand them. He demanded to know why they still kept Young-hee around. The subordinates didn't dare to delay after hearing this. They hurried to confront Young-hee. Young-hee refused to back down and said that everything was the owner's fault. Why should they fire her and the tailor? As she spoke, she was about to go find the boss to argue, but Jin-suk slapped her across the face. Because Jin-suk didn't want this matter to become known to everyone, even though Young-hee didn't mention her name. Everyone could easily guess who she was referring to. Not only did Jin-suk lose her job, her reputation was completely ruined too. How innocent she was. And now, when Jin-suk thinks back on this incident, she always feels extremely sorry for Young-hee. Young-hee's original intention was probably to seek justice for her, and prevent more people from being harmed later. Besides, in the end, this matter was all the boss's fault. After hearing this story, Mary was in tears. She wanted to go settle the score with the root of all evil, because she thought Young-hee was most likely killed by the boss. Dong-won looked at Mary, who suddenly became filled with a strong sense of justice, and gave a meaningful glance at the camera in her bag. But he didn't say anything. Later, the two of them arrived at the garment factory boss's residence. Unexpectedly, the once greasy and plump boss had become haggard and thin. He was out of breath even after saying a few words. Mary was busy introducing herself, while Dong-won stared intently at the photo wall nearby. The content of these photos was extremely inappropriate, proving that the boss had indeed done many bad things. To make this scumbag cooperate, Mary took out a banknote. The boss perked up immediately. He did remember that ugly woman Young-hee. That woman was not only ugly, but also extremely annoying. Mary asked the boss to tell everything that happened 40 years ago, and also deliberately mentioned that he wouldn't be punished for speaking out now. After all, the statute of limitations had long expired. Her implied meaning was to get him to admit that he had killed Young-hee.
공소시효. 그놈이 안 잡혔어?
Mary didn't understand what this sentence meant, but the boss said, it was that blind man who killed Young-hee, wasn't it? Didn't the police arrest him? Dong-won was extremely shocked when he heard this. 40 years ago, at that time, the boss invited Cam to a party just for fun. When he saw Cam actually show up, the boss immediately introduced Cam as being extremely skilled at seal carving. He also urged Cam to show his skills right away. He said that the big bosses would patronize Cam's seal carving shop afterward. Cam didn't decline. He took out his tools, then he finished carving the seal by touching it with his hands. When everyone saw that the seal was perfectly carved, they were all shocked by the blind man in front of them. They really enjoyed this little performance. So they drank and chatted with Cam. The party didn't end until late at night. After everyone else got drunk and fell asleep, the boss brought up the fact that Young-hee had opposed him. He questioned Cam about whether he had been involved. Cam quickly knelt down and said he was utterly loyal to the boss. He added that he had always been grateful to the boss for allowing him to open a shop in front of the garment factory, but the boss was still angry. The humiliation Young-hee had made him suffer, he had to take it out on Cam. He yelled that Cam and Young-hee were trash. If he wanted to kill them both, it would be easier than squashing an ant. Cam quickly nodded in agreement and said, that's right. No one would have thought Cam was such a person. After he left the party, perhaps thinking about what had just happened, Cam's expression was very complicated. Then he went home. He asked his wife why she had to meddle in other people's business. Young-hee didn't say anything. She just kept writing to expose the boss's evil deeds. Later, when the boss found out about this, he was furious. He ordered his subordinates to fire Young-hee immediately, but this wasn't enough to calm his anger, so the boss immediately made a call to gather people. Late at night, Cam received an order to take his wife and child to the back mountain. He didn't know what was going on, but he still did as told. When they arrived, they were suddenly surrounded by a group of people. Young-hee asked if they were the boss's men. The men didn't deny it. Then they pushed Young-hee to the ground and started beating her. Cam shouted for them to stop immediately. He tried to step forward to stop them, but considering he was holding the child in his arms, he only put up a symbolic resistance. After the men the boss had called got tired of beating her and left, Cam hurried forward to check on Young-hee. He held her and cried uncontrollably. A few days later, Young-hee's injuries had mostly healed. She rushed into the boss's office, pinned him down on the sofa and beat him fiercely. She questioned why he had treated her that way. The garment factory employees hurried over and dragged her out. The boss, who had been rescued, panted with lingering fear. He couldn't understand why Young-hee was so stubborn. He refused to believe he couldn't handle a single woman, so he contacted the same group of people as before. He ordered them to hit harder this time. It would be better to let Young-hee lie in bed for more days. These thugs never intended to kill anyone, but Cam, perhaps fed up with the mockery and humiliation, actually had the thought of killing his wife. He knocked Young-hee unconscious and carried her up the mountain. Then he threw her down without hesitation. This action completely stunned the men the boss had hired. They never expected Cam to be such a ruthless person. But the problem was that Cam didn't deal with the body. They had to help bury the body on the spot. Thinking about these events, the boss became extremely emotional. He thought it was the thugs who had buried the body too deep, which erased all traces of the blind man's murder. This version of the story shocked Dong-won. He rushed forward in anger and questioned why the boss was lying. He shouted, "You're the one who killed her. Why are you blaming someone else?" As he spoke, he tried to strangle the boss. Mary, afraid someone would die, hurried to stop him. Dong-won snatched Mary's bag and took out the camera. Then he took the camera and left. Cam returned home. As soon as he entered, he sensed his son's presence. He asked why his son had come without calling in advance. Dong-won said he had met a garment factory boss that day. Cam didn't understand why he was mentioning this.
아버지 혹시 어머니 죽였어요?
As soon as these words were spoken, Cam sat down in silence. Dong-won's heart seemed to stop beating for a moment. He stared at his father with a look of utter disbelief. He asked why his father had done such a thing. Cam said he had a miserable childhood. Since he could remember, he had been surrounded by mockery and insults. People thought a blind man was utterly unworthy of learning seal carving. Some even often took their anger out on him. But Cam never even knew who had hit him. He endured hardships for many years, and finally got his own stall outside the garment factory. He had originally thought his life was finally going to take a turn for the better, but unexpectedly, no one came to his stall. Just when he was helpless and confused, Young-hee appeared. She praised his seal carving as really excellent. Since she was his first customer, Cam gave her a seal for free. Since then, every time Young-hee passed his stall, she would greet Cam with a smile. When she saw he hadn't eaten lunch, she would even take the initiative to bring him food. It was the first time in Cam's life that he had met someone who treated him so well. He felt like he had fallen in love. After Young-hee ran away shyly, the owner of the neighboring stall, just for fun, teased Cam about being lucky, saying he had actually won the affection of a stunning beauty like Young-hee, and that he should seize the chance to confess his love quickly. Cam was greatly encouraged by these words. He really mustered up the courage to confess. Later, in front of everyone as witnesses, the two held their wedding in front of the stall, the factory. Boss even took a group photo of them specially. At that time, Cam made up his mind to let Young-hee live a good life. But their life was still the same as before. They had to work hard every day to earn a living. Later, Dong-hwan was born. Young-hee not only had to go to work, but also had to run out of the factory during breaks to feed the baby. She felt like she had more things to do than ever before. Cam felt extremely guilty. Then one day, a good friend of Cam's came to visit, and unexpectedly asked about Young-hee's character out of the blue. Cam answered truthfully that she was very good, saying she was virtuous, gentle, considerate, and kind. It was a pity that he couldn't see her appearance.
얼굴은 못 보는 게 나을 거야.
Cam asked suspiciously what was going on. Only then did he learn that Young-hee was an ugly woman, but he had been kept in the dark all this time. He had originally thought that after getting married, he would be free from mockery, but everything was still the same as before. Everyone had kept pushing him and Young-hee together, just to watch an even bigger joke. Cam felt like the sky had fallen. He couldn't understand why the people around him had so much malice towards him. Even his wife had lied to him. Even 40 years later, he still felt resentful about what he had gone through.
아름다운 건 존경받고 추한 거는 멸시당해.
Cam said seriously that when he learned the truth, there was only one thought in his mind, and that was to get rid of Young-hee quickly, so as to escape the mockery and contempt she had brought him. At first, he only thought about how to make her leave, until the night he was humiliated by the factory boss. Cam's resentment towards Young-hee reached its peak. When Young-hee was being severely beaten, he had prayed countless times in his heart that she would die. But things didn't go as he wished. Later, after Young-hee recovered from her injuries, she went to pick a fight with the boss again. Cam yelled at Young-hee because of this. Young-hee complained that she had been bullied since childhood because of her ugly appearance. No one believed what she said. It was Cam who had made her feel the warmth of the world. But these words not only failed to make Cam change his mind, but also angered him. Thinking about the shame Young-hee had brought him, Cam covered her mouth and nose. After a while, Young-hee stopped struggling. Cam was shocked beyond words, but he quickly calmed down. He carried Young-hee on his back to the mountain, then angrily threw her down.
나는 내 팔자에 들어 그 모멸감을.
Now all the truth has come to light. Dong-hwan looked at the father he had lived with for over 20 years, and felt an overwhelming sense of strangeness. But Cam didn't care. He thought Dong-hwan should be grateful to him. If it weren't for him, Dong-hwan would have lived with the mockery brought by his ugly mother since childhood.
예비가 평생 뼈 빠지게 이런 걸 그저 받아먹기만 하는 놈이잖아.
Dong-hwan wasn't moved by this argument. He said seriously that his father was a murderer. Cam was so angry that he tried to hit him, but was pushed to the ground. Cam roared that the statute of limitations had long expired. He had done nothing wrong. He had only worked hard for the life he wanted, and now he had finally succeeded. The next day, Dong-hwan asked Mary to meet him at a cafe. He hoped she would help publicize the footage she had shot. Mary asked if he was sure he wanted to do this. If the respected Cam was exposed as a murderer, it would affect Dong-hwan more or less. Dong-hwan said he had deleted all the unnecessary parts. Mary was stunned. Dong-hwan thought that although Cam was detestable, he was still a miracle of South Korea. After all, like father, like son indeed. Mary finally saw through the hypocrisy of the man in front of her. She said she had talked to the factory boss again the day before. When they talked about why no photos of Young-hee were taken, the boss replied that every employee had to fill out an information form before joining the company, and he had taken all the photos on those forms. When it was Young-hee's turn, he had even asked her to tuck her loose hair behind her ears. At this point, Mary placed the photo in front of Dong-hwan. She didn't know if he was still interested, but none of that mattered anymore. After Mary left, Dong-hwan took out his mother's photo. When he saw that Ms. Young-hee had a normal appearance, he burst into tears. It turned out Young-hee wasn't actually ugly. It was just that she was too upright and didn't fit in with the group. She had suffered from everyone's prejudice and malicious slander. The movie ends here. This movie only cost $160,000, yet it profoundly explores how complex human nature can be. With the appearance of a skeleton, everyone insisted that Young-hee was ugly. At first, I really thought so too. It wasn't until the end that I realized it was the people around Young-hee who had stuck bad labels on her. After so many years, everyone had even forgotten what she really looked like. Young-hee bravely pointed out her father's mistakes, but was blamed by her family. She stood up for the bullied female worker, which blocked everyone's way to make money. So everyone ganged up to bully her. Even her husband, after hearing what his worker friend said, joined the opposing side. Yet such a kind person ended up with such a fate. The deceased didn't come back, and didn't even get a chance to clear her name. While those who had done wrong showed no remorse, it's really too depressing and suffocating. Finally, I won't say who noticed it, Dong-won and the young version of Cam are actually played by the same actor. If you like my commentary, please subscribe to my channel. Your support is my greatest encouragement.